I knew Gershwin because of his work on, with Jean-Jacques Perret, Kaleidoscopic Variations, The Inside from Way Out. His work on the first Moog Quartet. Uh, I think Gershwin did some radio and TV commercials. Uh, and in that period of time, Gershwin and I had quite a bit to do with each other, and so I was familiar with that type of work that he did. You know, the reason that the early ones drifted like that, you know, it was an engineering mistake, but we didn't worry about pitch because the first musicians we worked for weren't interested in pitch. They weren't playing melodies, they weren't playing harmonies. They just wanted to make different timbres, different sounds. So pitch wasn't that important. And you know, we didn't foresee the day that somebody would actually want it to be in tune. You know, we made a lot of mistakes in the instruments for the garden. You know, so when Gershwin placed his order, we knew how to avoid mistakes. So the instruments we built for Gershwin were the same general idea. They were modular systems with extra facility for remembering and quickly recalling specific setups, patches. And you know, it was a completely different design, different circuit boards, and it was what we it incorporated what we learned from the museum concert. It was just amazing for me to be in Carnegie Hall. I think it's the first time in my life I'd ever been in Carnegie Hall. And, you know, there I was in the middle of the orchestra, and everybody was excited and, you know, digging the music. And my Aunt Dorothy sat next to me. She's, you know, lived in New York City for most of her life here. She was just so excited at the whole thing, and wanted everybody to know that what her nephew, where her nephew was. And right in the middle of the concert, she stood up and looked at the audience and said, "My nephew is Robert Moog." Now, once the 70s began, my company began making smaller instruments that were then sold through musical instrument stores. And my direct contact with musicians in general was really cut back, because now there was this, we didn't deal with the musicians directly. The very few we saw were performing artists, you know, Keith Emerson, and Rick Wakeman, Jan Hammer, you know, they came by for some special things, but my frame of reference changed dramatically from the 60s to the 70s. In the 60s, I was involved on an ongoing basis with many experimental musicians. I don't see anything really strikingly new today that, you know, that can't be traced to what was being discovered in the 60s. I think that the 60s was a wellspring of so much creativity. There were crazy times. You know, some people even say, you know, a little bit decadent and irrational, but there was something about, you know, the post-Kennedy years and the civil rights advances that were made in the mid-60s. And then, you know, groups like the Doors and the Grateful Dead and the Beatles and the Stones. You know, it just released this throughout the world. I think this is. You know, it released this incredible energy, incredible creativity, and musicians are still feeding off that. You know, while I've been here, I've heard several performances on some of it on very, very sophisticated digital equipment. You know, the very latest thing. But artistically, it goes back to you know the composers, the experimenters of the 50s and 60s. After the 70s, I became less accessible to our musician customers because our products were now being sold through dealers and not directly. And I lost the close connection with Gershwin that I had before that. And I had no idea of the breadth of his compositional interests and capabilities. At this uh, 80th birthday celebration, the whole event was great, but by far the most moving part of it for me was the concert of Gershwin's music, and it just blew me away that Gershwin has such a wide-ranging talent. You know, sometimes musicians are either songwriters or pop musicians, or they're record producers, or they're, you know, classical composers. Rarely do you find a person who's done very successful pop records, has put on all these experimental live performances, and has composed such compelling, uh, serious music for traditional instruments. I was just knocked out by it. As an engineer, uh, you know, my job is to uh, take a need that is perceived by somebody else and find the best way to satisfy that need. You know, and whether that's with an old technology or new technology, uh, you don't determine ahead of time. It's not like a religion. You know, you have several ways of doing something. You can analog, digital, you know, software, no software. All these are possibilities that an electrical engineer today can call upon. Uh, I tend to gravitate toward needs that use analog circuitry because I know a great deal about that. In fact, I know when formal engineering training needs to be abandoned, and you need to function intuitively as an engineer with analog stuff, and that knowledge. Not too many other engineers have that knowledge. Uh, you know, people say, "Oh, you know, you design analog stuff. What do you think of digital? You know, like it's the enemy. You know, what do you think of Iraq?" Uh, uh, it's not that way at all. If if you said to me, you know, I want you to build this instrument with all this stored information, and I want to be able to have all these algorithms, I wouldn't try to do that by analog. I would use digital like any other engineer would do. But if I were to select a problem to solve, like to design a mini Moog for the 21st century, I would pick something that used a lot of analog because that's what I'm good at.